could sprint from my office to his cubicle and get on the phone, he'd be doing it. And I'd monitor it, and he would nail it every time. I mean, just his application speed was within 5 minutes, never more. The only way it was more was if he couldn't get a hold of the client. I mean, what a machine. He got to be the #1 salesperson in the company fast. Faster than people who had been there 5 years. Because he was going to apply this stuff. What was in it for him is he knew if he got something from me, he'd make more money. And he'd use it over, and he'd never forget it. He'd always use it. Has to be used consistently by the entire sales team and the sales leaders. Well, I got my own style, but I want you to use this. It's not gonna get it done. All right, let's see what time I have here. We'll go through this and then we'll take a quick break. Sales funnel, KPIs, and accountability. We need to understand our sales funnel for developing powerful key performance indicators. And we need the right key performance indicators to hold people accountable. Part of those are the 5 key profit multipliers. How many people right now would have measured the 5 key profit multipliers? Be able to do it? Not easy, right? Okay. It's so much easier to coach and manage, and I'll share that. You're going to get much better projections. Anybody ever get surprised at the end of the month where the rep has all this activity, they're talking about all this stuff, at the end of the month, you have vapor. Like, where'd that all go? You're a cold machine. Nothing, right? And you can help the sales reps. So let's go through a couple steps here. We'll draw a simple sales funnel. Okay. So in the sales funnel, at the top are all the leads. At the bottom is show me the money. And in between is everything else that happens. Now the height of the sales funnel is sales cycle in terms of time. Anybody has a sales cycle that's like a day or 1 call? Anybody have that? Anybody go out to like 6 months sales cycle? Okay. Yeah. So different businesses are going to have different sales cycles. If you're a convenience store, what's your sales cycle? It's like a pancake, right? So up here is 100% of the leads, and down here, the width at the bottom is your conversion rate. That's, of all these things you shove into this sales funnel, how many come out the bottom? And what we have to define are the different stages of what happens in your call process. And I'm going to go over it quickly, but you can spend hours on it. So at the company I was referencing, what started the whole process, they'd have all these reports, which I didn't care about. I wanted them to use the reports, but what was most important to me was a meaningful conversation. So in my mind, the meaningful conversation is what starts the game. Okay. Meaningful conversation would mean that you've spoken to somebody about a new opportunity and had a conversation about it that kind of outlined it. So you could get kicked out the door, and that's okay. You talk to them, you decide, hey, it's not a match. Again, lose fast is a success in my book. Or you could have and say, well, you know, I'm looking at this meeting in February, here's my budget, here's what I'm looking for. So we tracked meaningful conversations. That was the trigger point. Then there might be like call, email, all this stuff, send samples, all this stuff that could happen. I didn't care about that. If somebody's taking 7 phone calls to close something, that's no more, that's not better than somebody who's closing in 2 phone calls because they're better in the interaction. So all this other stuff is fluff. It was logged because we want notes. Spoke to Sally Sue on this date. But I didn't care about that. Next thing that I really cared about were projections. Projection is when you get down to, well, looks like it could be 1,000 bags, $5 a pop. I think it's 50% likely we win, and here's the expected close date. Would you like to know that information in your business? What's in the sales funnel? Would that help you avoid the surprises at the end? And you could coach the opportunities. So some of the things that I do with clients are as simple as a Google Doc that logs every lead, meaningful conversation. They walked in the door, they called about carpet, flooring, whatever, and we just code them. I see the notes, what's going on. When they close, they go green. When we lose them, they go red. If it's white, it means we better have a next action. There has to be something to do. So, meaningful conversation, projections, close. That's what I would measure in the sales funnel. Your sales funnel may be different, depending on your business. But the key is to outline what's happening that's important that you measure. Does that make sense? Okay. So we draw the sales funnel with the steps to the sale, and we figure out what are the key points. We pick those key components. In this case, it was meaningful conversation, projections, and then at the end was keeping score. We define what meaningful conversation is. So I didn't want, again, it was that unique opportunity. If I spoke to Ken about 2 separate projects, they were 2 meaningful conversations in the way we would record it. But if I spoke to Ken 3 times about the same, 1 meaningful conversation, because I wanted opportunities. I wanted to know what opportunities we had. If I got blown out the door, again, that's fine. It died right here in the sales funnel. Not everything's going to get down to projection. Not everything is going to get from here to here. So we want to define our sales projections as well. And I'll show you an example, but generally, what we want to know is some type of quantity, hours, numbers, 1,000 pieces, and the dollar amount that would likely result from it. So if it was 1,000 pieces at $5 each, the total potential is $5,000. Then you want to evaluate the opportunity. Is it 10% likely, shot in the dark? Is it 100%, I know this is going to close, it's just a matter of when? Is it 50-50 coin flip? Everybody see why that part's important? Because that's really, when we look at that, if somebody's a 90% closer and they have 100,000 in projected business, we feel we'll probably get 90,000, right? If somebody's a 20% closer and they have 100,000 in business, we're going to get 20,000. Huge difference. So we have to factor in the likelihood that we're going to win. Sales projections are key, so is finding it. Okay, so then we determine the weekly or monthly goals. For my team, they had goals based on using a version of the 5 ways. So let's say team member A was great closer, higher average order. They might have less goals. They might have to make less calls or have less meaningful conversations because they're much more efficient. I had other people that would just bang the phone. They just banged the phone, they'd call, talk to anybody, their average order was low. It was like a wrestling match. I'd like, give me those clients and stop playing with them. Talk to the people who can give you the real business. But you'll see that the reps have all different profiles. So my sales manager, he would sit in his office and he'd look right down the row. And every day would be a recorded number for each rep. Their goals would be sitting there for the week, and how many they had week to date would be up there. So if they needed 25 of these meaningful conversations in a week, you could see Monday, Sally had 5, this many orders, this much sales volume. If Sally did 25 and we got to Wednesday and she had 10, Sally, I know that we're behind this week. What are we going to do? How are we going to block our time to make sure that we hit these numbers? He had real-time data every day. It wasn't rocket science, it was look at the board. And his assistant did it. So all he did was look at the board, figured out where we were, and coached from that. Would that be pretty simple to work with? So we need to develop the reports and coach using the KPIs and the multipliers. So I'll share a couple examples here. This is terrible. I had to scan this, an old report. But what you can see here are like dates, like when this would close, notes. This would be the product here. This is how many, like 1,500. Then there was the amount that you could get, possibly. We factor in the opportunity, 50, 20%, 100%. And this is what we could expect. So every week on a Monday, my sales manager would have all reps list of what was projected and would coach from that. Hey, I see that this company's looking at $5,000 worth. We only have it at 50%. What can we do to help move that up to 75? What's our next step in that? Made it a lot easier to coach. Because first, most times we don't know what the heck's going on, right? They're just out there doing their thing. But then from that perspective, if we can coach, that's where we can help them increase their conversion rate. I used to hold closing clinic, and I'd say, okay, every week, bring me your toughest stuff. Let's talk about it as a team, and let's figure out how to close it. Everybody learns, get better accountability, and they know if there's a hole. We would project out months. So I would see a lot of times a couple things. I would see maybe they had a nice week coming up, and then this huge hole that we'd be in trouble. Or I'd see things rolling. Oh, it's going to close this week. It's going to close next week. It's going to close the week after. You start to get an understanding of what's going on with the business. We did a monthly performance report card that would tell us how they're performing against their KPIs. So for example, if you look down here, you see orders per contact. I knew every rep had a different rating, but I knew if they made 100 calls or 25 calls, I could just multiply that by 1.1. I'd know how many orders they were going to get. Because the numbers stayed the same unless they improved the skill. So I always knew that these calls led to these orders. And I knew what their average order was. So they had goals for average order, 1,000, and theirs was 853. So they're at 85% of goal. But when a team member says, I want to make more money, we could do something more than say, hey, sell more. We could say, well, how can we increase your average order? How can we get clients to buy more? Do you think we can get your profit margin up? You seem to be bidding low all the time. You know, Sally Sue is getting 35%, you're going at 29. What's behind that? Is it the leads we're selecting? Is it you're concerned that you're going to lose? Anybody ever go low because they're scared? Honestly? Yeah. You're scared you're going to lose, right? So sometimes that happens with reps. But to the extent that we have these numbers, we would have a report card for every rep and then see trending. So I don't want to blow you away with all these numbers. Just wanted to give you a visual for some of the things that the sales manager had to coach from, the tools that were at his disposal. All right, let's take a break. I'm sure everybody's brain's full. And fill out your report card. We'll take a 10-minute break, so by that clock, actually I'll give you a better time, because I'm sure that's